We've just returned from Gamescom 2019 with a lot of capture and interesting impressions in tow. I was there on the show floor with my good friend Alex Battaglia, who is joining us today to discuss the game Wrath, Aeon of Ruin, or Aeon of Ruin.
And this was the thing. We at DF pride ourselves in looking at the large AAA, the incredible graphical showcase, but this is graphically and technologically interesting for a completely different reason.
Precisely.
And it's the most impressive thing I saw at Gamescom, for me at least. That's my impression.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not the most impressive technically.
It's
more like this was
not,
perhaps my favorite game that I played at the show.
That's what I mean, yeah.
The only thing that gets close is maybe something like Streets of Rage 4.
Ooh, yeah.
But this was really good. So, a little backstory then. So this is like part of the new initiative that the 3D Realms guys have been doing to sort of reach out to the community, and a lot of the seasoned modders and developers out there that have been working with classic engines throughout the years have been given a chance to basically make complete games. So we saw that with Ion Fury, but this time with Wrath, everything is built in the Quake engine. Or more specifically, the Dark Places fork of the Quake engine, which adds a lot of new features which do not, I'd say, ruin the authentic feel at all. In fact, It feels very authentic, but it does allow for more complex map design.
Yeah, that's the one thing, and you can see that when there's a lot of people pulled in from the community from this, and I think Arcane Dimensions is a form of inspiration for the project, and Arcane Dimensions is a mod for Quake, for example, which requires an engine like Dark Places, which increases the amount of, I think, brushes that can be used. So the map sizes can be larger than your typical Quake map. And this uses it completely. There's like this large open kind of hub area at one section of the game that you get out to, where you can see the other areas in the distance that you'll eventually be going to. Basically, the game is a weird mix. It has obviously that kind of awesome Quake, really tight, satisfying combat, and we'll talk about that a bit more, what that exactly means. But it also has inspirations, I would say, like from Hexen 2 and Turok, in terms of how it functions.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. We talked to the developers about this, and this is precisely the kind of design goal that they have in mind. It is a collection of levels, of course, but it's all sort of pieced together through this hub system, and you will need to return to different levels. You'll have to find keys and other objectives, so there's a little bit of a back and forth kind of design to it. So it rewards exploration. In fact, it kind of demands it, but it still has that tight, interesting level design that you would expect from a Quake engine game from that era.
Yeah, but with the interesting backtracking, unlocking elements, like you collect these glyphs, which will unlock eventually a portal gate to another level and things like that.
Precisely.
Which I am a big fan of, because I enjoy looking around games and not just finding temporary upgrades, but things that allow me to advance as well. And that's something that I actually really enjoyed in the demo. There were tons of secrets that you could find, and a whole lot of gameplay systems built around finding those secrets. And one of the most interesting ones for me was their kind of response to how save games were done from games from this era.
Oh, yeah. What was that thing called?
The Soul Leash?
I don't know about that. I can't remember. But either way, what it was sort of it's an item you can pick up, and you can pick up these different items here and sort of click the middle mouse button and select them from your inventory, and then use them by pressing the R key.
Yes.
Well, in this case, there's one of them, and it's a collectible, basically. When you collect this item, you can essentially quick save. So you do have quick saves, but you have to use them strategically, and you will have more quick saves if you explore the level carefully, because they are often in hidden places. Like there's this place here early on where you can use the charge attack with your blade to sort of launch across a huge gap, and bam. And I think it was actually called the Soul Tether.
Soul Tether, that's it.
So yes, Soul Leash, I can see where that would come from.
I think I was thinking of Life Leech or something, which there's all these kind of power-ups that you can pick up that are very Hexen styled, that you can activate when you wish.
Precisely.
And one of them allowed you to leech life from the enemy when you kill them, and another one gave you invulnerability, but your life afterwards would tick down to 5 HP. So it's great to use when you already know you're taking tons of damage. And I ended up using it to stay alive at one portion. It was very tactical usage of these things.
Oh yeah, and the game is pretty difficult so far. In a good way, but you really have to be on your toes. There is no regenerating health. It's very old school in that way. I guess then we should probably discuss then why it's interesting that they're using the Quake engine. So obviously, the Quake engine can produce visuals that have a very distinct look, I've found. And the sort of limitations that it places on the developer results in some interesting designs that I feel are still very interesting and attractive. And that is definitely the case here.
Yeah. Right.
And even though it does use dark places, it doesn't push the feature set in the way that we've seen a lot of dark places related mods do. Like there's no super dynamic lighting and shadows, and they're not going heavy on like, you know, normal maps and other complex textures. Like here they've opted, at least by default, to run with unfiltered textures.
Yeah.
And sort of, you know, it's the typical somewhat blocky looking geometry, but used in some really interesting ways.
The one thing that I did notice that they are using from dark places is some of the dynamic lighting in a very specific way that I think is really cool. All the pickups in the game.
Oh yeah.
Actually, like the health vials and the armor give off an extremely faint a bit of light. So they're not just like tagged unlit like they would do in Quake games or something like that.
Right.
So you could always see them no matter what, but they give off a tiny bit of light. And it has this like lambent glow to the red vials, or like the armor is like a tiny like white sheen around it. And it looked really good.
You also get a bit of that when you destroy certain enemies.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Using specific weapons, there's like a slight glow under them as it hits.
That bio launcher like gun, you know, like the gun that's almost like from Unreal. That
Exactly.
looked really good. And another thing that they used was default Quake id Tech 1 doesn't have lit transparency, kind of.
That's right.
And they used that for the fog in the opening bit of the game. It looks like this kind of foot-level fog is lit up by the torches. I just think that it was all atmospheric, kind of moody stuff.
And another great effect I loved was sort of the simulated water caustics.
Oh, that was amazing.
It's really just an alpha texture layer, sort of, you know, that's animated by hand that they kind of place around bodies of water, but it's surprisingly effective.
And, you know, they do like a lot of the tricks back from the day. Like they start off a thing made out of geometry, and when they do the arch portion, say for like an inlay,
Yes.
you pointed this out and I was like, that's amazing. It turns from geometry into a texture, and you barely notice it actually when you're just walking along.
Exactly.
But it's a super smart usage of this kind of primitive tech.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's extremely visible, and I think visibility is another thing this game should be praised for in its current state. I recognized every single enemy type from the distance,
Yeah.
and kind of knew what I was expecting in terms of combat when I saw them.
Yeah, that's key to old school shooters.
That happened within like 5 minutes of me playing the game. It just became intuitive, and because it used this engine that I'm familiar with and the way it feels to move around, I was already bunny hopping around. You can bunny hop in water in this game, just like in Turok,
Oh, yeah.
by the way. There's a lot of trick movement that they already built in, and it's just enhanced by this tech. And one thing that is going to, obviously by using dark places and not id Tech 1, it will have a fully unlocked frame rate, not just up to 90 and then the physics get a little wonky, but it will be fully unlocked, I believe, up to, in our demo, if you turned off VSync, it would have been up to 1,000 FPS or something like that.
Although they did say they were playing with the idea maybe of setting the default limit to 666. But we'll see. We'll see. Speaking of that, though, before we get off the engine stuff, I did want to say I talked to them a little bit about console ports, since this is also announced.
Ooh, yeah.
So we were playing on PC, obviously, but there's been some issues getting Ion Fury ported due to the way the build engine works, and they're making good progress on that now. But in this case, with Wrath, they actually already have the game up and running at a locked 60 FPS on the Switch. So, and they had to sort of re-architect the game in some interesting ways and find people that could do this. Sounds like it was quite a challenge, but the result is that you basically have this game running beautifully on the Switch hardware. Supposedly, I still need to see it for myself to be sure, but at least it sounds highly promising, which was a concern. So it's looking good. And you might be wondering, like, okay, well, it's an old game or like an old engine. Why would this be difficult to run on the Switch? And these engines just aren't designed for the way consoles work. They're super single-threaded. There's just a lot of like techniques and approaches that they use to rendering that don't play nicely with modern hardware.
Yeah, and they're also like brute force versions of the old engines. Like this one uses way more geometry and a larger level than any Quake level. So it's like kind of going beyond it, even if it is dark places. It's big. It's a big game.
We should also talk about, I guess,
yeah.
like the feel of the game, because this was the thing that really stuck out to me. Like, just both the player movement, the momentum you have, and the weapons themselves. They each have two functions, and each of them are very satisfying to use. And just juggling weapon types against the different types of enemies, with each enemy having its own sort of threat. You have to quickly identify visually, okay, this enemy does this thing, so I can't get too close, it might explode. This enemy flies, this enemy comes, and that sort of like prioritization of threats is key to these old school games. That's just how the enemies tended to work, and it's good because you have to stay on your toes, and you're figuring this out very quickly as you move around the game, and it's not just like sit back and hide behind cover and shoot at things in the distance. You're really up in their face, and you've got to be quick.
Yeah, and there was a moment I remember when you died because you set a what is it called, like a soul tether in an area, and it was, you had to keep thinking about how you would prioritize the enemies after you'd respawn so you could grab HP.
I saved with 5 HP at that one spot, which is a problem you might be familiar with, but you can totally get your way out of these situations. And that was when the gameplay really hit home for me, where I was like, okay, like you really had to be strategic and deal with the enemies very specifically to get through it, and it was awesome.
Yeah, and it's not just like the tactical thing, but the satisfaction of the weapon types themselves. They're all meaty, punchy, gory, kind of loud things. Like the pistol also has like a triple shot where it almost acts like a shotgun.
Yep.
The shotgun has a charge shot, which turns it into a one-shot flat cannon from Unreal.
The shotgun itself is amazing, by the way.
Oh, I loved it.
And also the secondary attack on the blade. I think I mentioned that earlier, but you use this and it lunges forward into a huge pack of enemies and destroys them. But you can also use it to traverse sort of open spaces. It's like extending your jump, so that's fun.
They also do a bit of like Half-Life or even modern thing where every single time you pick up a new weapon, like Doom 2016 does this really well too. There's an inspection animation where your character looks at it, and it's like all these satisfying, like little animations they added to the game.
Exactly.
And it's only in development too, so it's gonna get, snazzier, quicker, and more satisfying as time goes on, I assume. And that's kind of my takeaway from this. It hit all those notes that I expect of a game from this era, while also taking things from the modern to make it even better. Like there's definitely some design decisions in here that I don't think a game from that era would necessarily make. We have enough bad 90s shooters alongside the good 90s shooters to know that. So
Exactly. But I think that's probably all we have to say on this for the moment. Obviously when it hits, I'm not sure when the release date is. I know we're both looking forward to it, but we'll definitely try to go more in depth on the game then, because there is a lot more to say and a lot more to examine when we have more time to play with it. But for now, it's shaping up to be an excellent game.
Yeah, I love it.
But that's going to do it for now. So if you enjoyed this video, as always, be sure to like and subscribe, ring the notification bell at the top, and of course follow us over on Twitter. And thanks for joining me, Alex.
Of course, John.
And thanks for the awesome time at Gamescom too. Like, we had a good run.
Yeah, we had so much fun together, right?
So until next time, this is John and Alex signing off.